Hello, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to the Keto Answers Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin, and joining me this week is Dr. Cate Shanahan. Dr. Shanahan is best known for her work with her book, Deep Nutrition, which is pretty much a textbook. It's amazing, but we chat in this episode all about her background, how the medical system is flawed from an education standpoint, really the biggest things that she saw with health between sugar and vegetable oils. Like, you'd be surprised which one was worse and which one, when removed, pretty much freed up all people's problems. And yeah, I mean, everything she's doing now and focusing on, it's a really, really awesome conversation. Dr. Cate just does a lot of great work in this space, and I'm really happy to bring this conversation to you. But before we get started, I want to let you guys in on a little secret. And that is that we have some brand new keto bar flavors. And so the same thing that we had with the almond butter brownie that you guys loved and went crazy about, I think we sold out in 5 days when we released that one. We have lemon poppy seed and salted caramel. So these two are just ridiculous. The lemon poppy seed tastes exactly like a frosted lemon poppy seed muffin or cake or whatever you buy at Starbucks that is delicious, but it kills you, so don't buy those things. And then also salted caramel, which tastes pretty much like it says, so salted caramel. So these things are great, on the go, as a treat, whatever. Same standards we have with the other bar. So we tested blood sugar with this, no blood sugar spike, no effect in ketone levels, actually increased a couple of team members' ketone levels. And yeah, I mean, otherwise the exact same. We actually bumped the collagen from 10 to 11 just because, 10 grams was enough, so we had to go 11. Otherwise, these things are amazing. So if you want to try them out before they go to stock, which may happen very, very soon, we just launched them at perfectketo.com and use the code NEWKETOBARS to get 20% off your order this whole month. So go stock up now, and if you already have, then go grab your favorite flavor. Mine is the lemon poppy seed. Unwrap that little sucker and enjoy it for the show. Doc, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I've been familiar with your work more from introduced to it from your book, Deep Nutrition, as I'm sure a lot of people have. But can you just give a brief background on your work history and kind of what you got you to the point you're at now?
So I'm a family medicine physician, and my goal in life from when I was a little girl was to really kind of get to the root of whatever, of understanding important stuff in the world. And when I went to medical school, I really wanted to kind of get to the root of understanding what was going on with just common problems that I had actually had, like shin splints, but nothing like that happened. And it was kind of disappointing that we learned to categorize diseases, but it seemed like there was just like a major lack of knowledge. So that was okay. I was kind of going about being a doctor for a couple of years until I got sick. And then when I got sick, nothing got me better. I had like some bizarre infection in my knee. I couldn't walk. It was terrible. 2 years of like not being able to do any exercise, and I had been an athlete, so it was horrible. But the only breakthrough there that turned my health around was my husband suggested maybe that sugar I was eating. I had like a quarter cup of sugar in my coffee, and maybe that wasn't good. So
how much?
A quarter cup. I had to make a special caramel sauce. I had to cook it myself. Yeah, to get it, the concentration right. So,
how did you have this knee injury in the first place? What happened here?
I didn't really know. I mean, I was actually, it was kind of bizarre. I was trying to redo my yard, right? I wanted to get rid of some invasive species that we had. We were in Hawaii, and I wanted to replace it with something really cool that I had to go drag a wheelbarrow up a hill. And my knee started hurting me while I was doing that. And I just thought I was kind of like overdoing it. And I'm not talking about like drag it up a hill for like a slope. It was like for 2 miles through like 3-foot tall grass to get this really special fern I really wanted to have in my yard. And I did get it.
Was it worth it?
Well, it actually died because you can't transplant these things. No one's been able to do it. I didn't really know that. But what happened was my knee had started hurting, and it didn't get better, and it actually got worse. And then I started getting fevers, and it was completely bizarre, some kind of infection. Like it's just like a virus or something that's in there, and it's still there. But it's my body's better able to control it now that I've changed everything about my diet. But that was kind of like the initiating event that made me dive deeper into actually the field of biochemistry, which helped me understand, what not only what sugar does to a body, but also the whole good fat and bad fat thing. That was, back in 2002, that first of all, there was no conversation about omega-3 fats or omega-6 or anything like that. There was certainly no conversation around keto. There was really no conversation because Google was just brand new, and the internet was just barely figuring itself out. And the thing that I discovered around fats, though, was so mind-boggling. Like I had to come to grips with the fact that what the biochemistry said about saturated fat and polyunsaturated fat and all this stuff was so important and so different than, and basically the opposite of what I learned in medical school. I had to come to grips with the fact that, butter wasn't something that was good to avoid. In fact, it was bad to avoid it. And that these oils that apparently the Harvard and folks had been telling us that we needed to get, like canola oil and soy oil, and had snuck their way into our diets that I hadn't paid attention to, I didn't learn about in school. These things were actually quite toxic and very pro-inflammatory, and actually the most pro-inflammatory thing in the human experience these days.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I don't think a lot of people realize, that they think, oh, I'm going to go see my doctor. My doctor should know everything. They're a doctor, and that's it. And so I had to do the same thing. I'm like you're talking about the same of having to go back and relearn a lot of these things. Is that something that you find is pretty pervasive through even now education? Have you looked back and see okay, what are they teaching now?
Same old garbage still, because basically the big picture here is that the reason we understand nutrition the way that we do, by we I mean the mainstream, that saturated fat's bad, salt's bad, all that stuff, has to do with a bunch of conflicts of interest, or people who had conflicts of interest back in the 50s that basically reinvented nutrition science from scratch, pretending we didn't know anything, which we actually did. We knew a lot more in 1930 about nutrition than we did in 1950, and even today. Like back in 1930, our dietary advice was much more sound than it is now.
Right.
So there was this invention of new nutrition science based on what was good for Procter & Gamble. And I mean literally Procter & Gamble, because they were the first major funding source in the millions for the American cardiology, American College of Cardiology. And so the American College of Cardiology had this major conflict of interest within them. Their board members decided to just go ahead and accept tons of money and become comfortable with advising people to stay away from butter and use Procter & Gamble's products, which were high in polyunsaturated fatty acids. And there was a whole lot of really bad science and really unethical scientists whose work helped create this gigantic mirage that all doctors still learn, nurses, dentists, dietitians, nutritionists, sports nutritionists, physical therapists, third graders. Everything we learn about nutrition is based on this invented reality that has its roots in a relationship between Procter & Gamble and the American College of Cardiology. I write about that a little bit in Deep Nutrition. It just, briefly. I also write about it on my website, and other people have written about it as well.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And one of the things that I get asked all the time is, either through email or Instagram direct messages, hey, you say this, and a lot of people are saying, eat these foods, this is okay. My doctor says that that's going to kill me. What's the deal with that? And usually I tell them to ask their doctor how much nutrition or biochemistry that they've learned outside of school, and when is the last time they've learned something new about it. And if it wasn't within the last couple of months or last year, then they should probably just find a new doctor. And a lot of people, I think, have a hard time mentally grappling with that, because they think that doctor means they should have all the answers at all the time, and everybody has the same access to this knowledge.
Exactly. We are, It's what Mark Twain said. He said something like, "It's not what I don't know that gets me in trouble. It's what I know for sure that just ain't so." And so that's where the entire field of healthcare is right now. We are so sure that we've got this right about nutrition, to the extent that we're unwilling to even take a look at the actual science that, this new other side, this kind of underground low carb keto movement, was paleo, now it's keto, has kind of put together a whole ton of great science, and doctors just are unwilling to consider that it could be valid at all, because we know for sure, because we learned it in school. We paid a lot, for our education.
Right. Okay. Sidetrack. You had this knee infection. You were putting a quarter cup of sugar in your coffee. Then you started learning about some of this stuff. What was the journey after that?
Well, what happened was I started paying attention to the oils and avoiding them. And in doing that, I realized, okay, so these things are truly bad. These polyunsaturated fats, that like soy oil, canola oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil. What is this stuff in? Okay, well, it's in my mayonnaise. It's in all the Marie calendars and the lean cuisine that my husband and I we were both busy, so we were just eating these kinds of convenience foods. Are you hearing that airplane flying overhead continuously? No? Good. Okay.
A little bit, but totally fine.
Sorry, it's like there's like a sightseeing plane that seems to come around whenever I'm on a podcast. So the all these ingredients in like salad dressing even, and in canned soups, it was amazing. I started seeing the stuff everywhere, and before there were statistical analyses available, I realized I had just been eating massive amounts of this stuff. But now I can tell you with confidence that the average American is consuming 80% of their fat calories from these vegetable oils, unless they're going out of their way to avoid them. Or they make everything at home from scratch and they never bought it, that margarine was good for you, and they avoid canola oil and they use olive and traditional oils. But the average American, 80% of their fat calories have been replaced by what we used to do, which is just traditional food, which I write about what that is in Deep Nutrition, and has been replaced with these 6 vegetable oils. And so as I got that out of my diet and started replacing that with more, Luke and I were making more foods from scratch. We used more butter. I wasn't shy about using butter anymore. I would just enjoy it, and more cheese and more olive oil. And I realized that I was able, at that same point in time, I realized retrospectively, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was enjoying my food more, and I wasn't such a slave to that quarter cup of, sugar syrup that I was pouring in my coffee every day. I was totally a slave to it. And this is so important to acknowledge. If you have a sweet tooth, chances are you might be a slave to it. What I mean by a slave to it was I felt like my whole day, the highlight of my day was at 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock, depending on my work schedule. I was going to have my little coffee confection, and I was looking forward to it all day. I would look at my watch and count down, how many hours left till I could get that thing. And then after I had it, it was like, wow, I can't wait till tomorrow. And so it was ruling my mind. It was ruling my relationship with food. It was taking over my day. And then as I got more healthy fats and learned more about sugar, and I write about this in Deep Nutrition as well, why sugar is bad, not just calorically, not just with the hormone insulin, but it chemically changes how your cells function due to a process called glycation. And, as I was learning about that and kind of motivated to cut down on my sugar intake, it was just easy. And I thought it was because I did it gradually, which is I'm sure important. But looking back now that I understand the effects of vegetable oils on the brain, which I write about in the second edition of Deep Nutrition, I realized that it was really important to get those vegetable oils out of my diet because my brain was made out of them. And that stuff in your brain changes your cravings extremely subtly, but almost like inevitably. You start craving starches and sugar in a way that you never would if your brain wasn't made out of that stuff.
Yeah, I think that vegetable oils are one of the things that people underestimate the most about nutrition and the things that you can fix. It was certainly the last thing that when I started learning about nutrition, I was like, oh, I mean, yeah, it's in some stuff. It can't be that bad. And I might get a little bit when I'm going out to eat, but not a big deal. And then I actually started eliminating it and being super rigorous about it. And I felt completely different. Like previous injuries that I had, are kind of just always aching, like a really bad ankle injury, stuff like that, just goes away completely. Sleep improves, skin quality improves, pretty much everything across the board. And so I think that with vegetable oils, they're so sneaky because you don't taste them and you don't taste the change in them either. And so, I mean, you can just kind of assume that when you go out to eat, you're getting a massive amount of vegetable oil. And this is like, I mean, we did a cooking class in Thailand when we took the Perfect Keto team there. And they were saying that even in like a typical Thai meal, you would have up to 1 cup to like 1.5 cups of vegetable oil per meal. And that's how much they use. And so pretty much anything that's cooked in a restaurant has that. And I've gotten to the point where I'm the annoying guy who asks, what do you cook this in? Can you cook it in butter or olive oil or something like that? But it's worth it. I mean, I feel so much different. And another thing that you're talking about as well is that it affects you in so many different spectrums. So I think that there's the immediate term of just inflammatory levels, but then how it affects your brains and what's made of your cells. I mean, I've read studies that show essentially, especially the phospholipid bilayer and some of the structural stuff in the brain, like you were talking about, can take up to 2 years to change over the quality of the fats in there. So if you're eating vegetable oils today, some of those fats, those low quality fats, can be incorporated into your cells for up to 2 years. So, I mean, you have this immediate inflammatory effect and this long-term performance effect that, brain, cellular function, everything it can impact. So, I mean, this is something that I don't know how we solve this problem, but it's something that I think that people on a ketogenic diet, especially, they load up on fats and they think, okay, unlimited fats, all good, not a problem, and then they're not mindful of the vegetable oils and in the quality of the fat, which I think is imperative.
There's a study that I show. There's a talk that I give called "Does Keto Give Athletes an Edge?" And the spoiler alert: the answer is yes, regardless of whether or not your endurance or what your sport is, whether it's a team sport or even weightlifting. But one of the slides I show in that talk is from a study on a ketogenic diet. There was an animal study, but the ketogenic diet actually was kind of a fail. It caused weight gain, and it made the rats like unhealthy. They had fatty liver. They started getting insulin resistance, which is a precursor to prediabetes and diabetes. And so this was actually used or maybe misused as evidence that the ketogenic diet is unhealthy. It's an older study, but it was one of the foundational ones that's referred to a lot. It was fairly influential. And I, of course, had to look at what was the fat that these mice were fed. And of course, it was one of the vegetable oils. It was, I think it was soy or corn. But so that makes all the difference because, sure, it was a ketogenic diet. And yes, those rats were producing ketones. But it goes to show you that my theory is that ketones it's important for your body to be able to make ketones. And ketones, of course, can also be like a great kind of tool if you consume them exogenously as well. But the ketones themselves are not, in my theory, they're not the super anti-inflammatory thing because these rats, they had plenty of ketones, massive amounts of them, but their CRP was elevated, their triglycerides were high, they had fatty liver disease, liver inflammation. So what the benefit that comes from a ketogenic diet is getting the vegetable oils out of your body because most of the human beings following a ketogenic diet who are having enough success where they continue with it, right, because they feel better, they don't feel bad, they're continuing with it because they're getting the butter and the cheese and they're actually avoiding those vegetable oils. And so it's like part of it is that you're avoiding the vegetable oils. And that's something that I just don't think is appreciated enough, because people are all focused on the sugar and the carb, which is absolutely important, because it's going to be very a lot harder to control your appetite, to get into ketosis if you are not paying attention to your carbs and your sugars. But the sort of reason that some people have success and some people don't, I think the main reason is the burden of vegetable oil in their body fat, in their tissues, and that remains in their ketogenic diet.
Right. So I think that this is such an important point. Let's just stop here and again reiterate that vegetable oils can be snuck in everywhere. What are your, I guess, top tips for people who are trying to remove them of areas where they don't know? I know you said condiments and things like that. Is it just checking labels, asking restaurants? What are your top tips here?
You absolutely have to check the label of everything that has an ingredients list. So you're not looking for like the saturated fat content or anything like that. You're looking at the ingredients, and I ask people to memorize the 6 bad oils. And I have this on my website, so we can probably post a link to it. It's an image actually that you can always refer to no matter where you are in the world. It has all of them, but I do ask people to memorize the 6 bad ones, which start with 3 C's and 3 S's. So it's corn, cottonseed, canola, soy, sunflower, safflower. And you have to look at everything, even if you're even if you're shopping at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or these upper end markets, even if your salad dressing or your mayonnaise says made with olive oil, you have to turn it around, because it can say made with olive oil if there's a drop of olive oil in the bottle. But the first thing is going to probably be soy oil or canola oil or something you want to avoid. And so that is tip number 1, is you have to look at everything: crackers, dried fruit, dried vegetables, chips, salad dressings, mayonnaise, dips. And then you have to avoid it when you're eating out, because if you eat out a lot, then you're getting an awful lot of this stuff. And by a lot, I mean 2-3 days a week, 2-3 times you go out to eat a week. Because if you're doing anything deep fried, if you're doing anything with a salad dressing or a dip, anything that has any kind of creamy sauce on it, I guarantee that is not butter in there. It's not cream in there. It's butter oil, which is soy oil and butter flavoring.
Yeah. And, I mean, what I tell people too with an ingredient list is think about if that thing is something fatty that you would actually eat. And so if it says something oil, okay, avocado oil, okay, I eat avocados. Olive oil, I eat olives. Canola oil,
right.
What is a canola? What is a safflower? Right. And like corn oil, okay, but like most people now that follow a little bit healthier diet, even with paleo or keto, that's kind of off limits. And so soy, I don't eat soy to get fat. It's not a naturally fatty thing. I think that's a really easy filter as well to kind of get some of this stuff off your plate. Okay, so vegetable oils aside, I mean, I think I've ranted about this in the last 15 episodes of the podcast, and people are probably sick of hearing about it. Okay, so you were in Hawaii, you started figuring out your own stuff, and then where was the learning from there? Were you applying that to patients, or how was your learning progressed?
Well, after about 2 years of just looking at the literature from every angle, I finally became comfortable enough to say, "Hey guys, butter's fine. Get these things out of your body," and I started recommending it, and boom, people will come back in 3 months. Their triglyceride levels might have been like 1,000, 1,500, and Hawaii is a little different. A lot of people make food from scratch there. So, or at least they did. So people that were cooking with canola and corn and, Wesson oil and stuff, it was easy for them to avoid a lot of these oils that had been in their diet just by swapping out what they were buying for olive, peanut, butter, cream, coconut even. And so it would make a huge difference. They would come back with like near normal. But I mean, so we're talking about from going over 1,000, which is like extremely elevated. And a normal level of triglycerides should be under 150. And they would come back with it pretty close to normal in just 3 months after just that one recommendation. I didn't tell them anything about, don't eat so much rice because I didn't have time. I thought this was more important. And so I prioritized it. And it was amazing. And they would tell me, oh, they feel so much better. And their blood pressure numbers would start looking better. And they would have more energy. And it was just like, oh my God. And their good cholesterol numbers would come up. And so it was just like this, it was really happening. It was like what the biochemistry predicts actually works. And so that's where I developed my like enduring faith in biochemistry. And if you just understand the molecule, the physiology at the cellular level, the hormonal level, the system-wide level, if you just understand those few things, you can predict what's going to happen in broad strokes in the very complex organism of the human body. So I gained more confidence about what I was predicting. I was predicting based on the biochemistry that people wouldn't have heart attacks, even if their cholesterol levels went up. Because that's what was happening, right? Like very often you tell people to eat better, and they're eating more butter. Their bodies are able to burn fat more. They're trafficking in fat more. That's going to raise their LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol. It's just going to happen for most people. And I was like comfortable with that because what the biochemistry was telling me was that actually LDL wasn't the cause of heart attacks anyway. It was having these vegetable oils in your lipoprotein particles that would then oxidize in the bloodstream and damage the arteries. And so that also is all laid out in Deep Nutrition. So the book has like 500 pages and like type font 10, right? I mean, it has a ton of information in there. And so it's not one of these quick fix, but I don't tell people who like want to lose, 50 pounds in 5 weeks, you should read my book. I say you should read, someone else's book, or maybe you want to rethink that goal actually, because I don't believe that's kind of a way of doing things. But it really has a ton of important information, especially in the 2 chapters that talk about good fats and bad, and another chapter called Brain Killer, because that's where I focus on the effect of vegetable oils on your physiology. There's about 300 references in just those 2 chapters alone, which combined are 150 pages in tiny font. So it really could be a book by itself. But that is, if anything, what I'm saying is like shocking or surprising or worrisome if about your cholesterol, that's where you should start if you wanted to read Deep Nutrition, which you should read.
And I'm assuming that, okay, so maybe LDL, maybe triglycerides, even transiently, especially when people are losing fat, were increased or elevated, but you probably saw inflammation levels plummet, fat, in an unhealthy fat plummet, and every other subjective and probably objective measure improve.
So this was in 2004 now. So we don't have insurance companies that are paying for C-reactive protein levels at this point in time, the high sensitivity ones. So the markers that I had, there just weren't. There wasn't like the NMR and the kind of cholesterol testing that we have now. It just wasn't available. But what I could look at was liver enzyme inflammation, and I could look at blood counts. And so I learned to interpret just subtle changes in those things as very important. Something very important and very good was happening when you got people off these diets. Like people would have like elevated platelets or funny shaped red blood cells or abnormally low white blood cells. And those types of things would correct. And those types of things, abnormally low white blood cells, those are actually precursors to down the road, you might be somebody who develops leukemia or lymphoma. And if your liver enzymes are high, you definitely are loaded with inflammation, and you're very high risk of something bad, like a blood clot maybe, or a heart attack. This abnormal liver enzymes is something that doctors have to overlook a lot, because we don't know what to do about them when they're slightly elevated. We test for hepatitis B and C and ask a few stupid questions about your sexual history, as a way of determining could there be some other kind of hepatitis or something. And but we just don't know that the vegetable oils is the number one cause of mildly elevated liver enzymes and the number one cause of fatty liver. It's not fructose, and it's not all the, soda plays a role, and soda independently can also do it. But I think the number one cause truly is these vegetable oils, because 80% of, not everyone's a sodaholic, but, most people don't know that they're eating all these vegetable oils.
Right. So, I mean, and about the liver enzymes as well, what I found is just that the reference ranges for most labs are just out of control, too high. So I don't know what you generally like to see them under, but yeah, this is the thing where like most doctors get it back and then, 38, 39, et cetera, for like some of these enzymes. And I feel like maybe under 30, under 20 even is probably a better indicator. I don't know what your opinion is here.
Well, I mostly just look at the normal ranges because without knowing any better, that's like good enough for me, right? So like I'm what I'm looking at is this abnormal, right? So is it like definitely abnormal? If I can say definitely abnormal, then I know I'm confident enough to like focus on it and talk about it. I'm going to give them the same advice anyway, even if it's normal. I'm still going to tell people to get off their vegetable oils. And there's usually something else going on that we can use as a marker, whether it's a lab test or something in how they're feeling that is easy to track.
Got it. And then so you obviously you're going with this, learning a lot in your clinic, and then did you move back to the mainland after that? And like, what was your transition there? Because I know that your life kind of took a little bit of a shift.
So we had been in Hawaii, but by 2010, the book had been published, and we'd been in Hawaii for like 10, 11 years. And I was just feeling like isolated there because there was no publicity. We couldn't do publicity. Podcasts weren't really quite a thing. And I felt like I had learned this really important stuff that could change, had changed the way I practiced medicine, and I wanted to share it. And so I started looking for work at with an organization that actually cared about that, because in Hawaii there was like nothing like Kauai. It was very conservative medically, and it was all like by the book basically. And I knew that there had to be places in the rest of America that would have more of an interest in wellness and enable me to kind of, I was hoping, dreaming, was fantasizing, educate other doctors, right? But that led to a job in New Hampshire. The person that recruited me ultimately ended up losing her job because like that whole line of thinking of wellness and stuff turned out to be a dead end because there's just no business model for it. But I didn't get the message about the lack of business model. So I looked for a job in Napa, and then I looked for another job, and I just kept looking for jobs and believing that the lip service that people were paying to the concept of wellness. So I dragged Luke around the country for a few years. And then finally, I just recently got this job here where I'm actually making a difference in a completely different setting, where I'm able to, spend more time with people working for Florida's largest and oldest family-owned company, where they actually, like, I am amazed every day that they actually care about their employees, which is something you're not going to see probably in a corporate setting, and you're not going to see like in most companies. But this is a family, fourth or fifth generation now of the same family owned. So they really care about their employees, and they're like totally going out on a limb, paying me. It's not really something that was in the budget, but they're paying me anyway because they believe it's the right thing to do to help their employees understand what a healthy diet is and help figure out how to create this new culture where, the workplace doesn't have cupcakes and M&Ms and stuff. The typical workplace has all this unhealthy stuff all the time. Well, we're trying to shift that. So this is an amazing opportunity. I'm really excited about it. And I think it's the only way that, a doctor like myself can really not feel like we're beating our head against the wall every single day. Right. Unless we figure out, something about our own practice that if we own it ourselves, which is really difficult to do if you're working with insurance, and you're basically selling information which nobody wants to pay for. That's supposed to be free. People will pay for supplements, and they'll pay for pills, and they'll pay for procedures, but there's no business model around information. So that I learned that the hard way too. So it's just, I think that's why it's taken so long for this life-changing information I feel like we've kind of reached a tipping point now, and it's kind of got a life of its own. We don't have to wait for the next PaleoFX conference. We don't have to wait for just the Slow Carb USA conferences. There's a life of its own now. There's so many podcasts and stuff. It's just really great to see that. But the lag and the delay, even though the information is valid and life-changing and you can cure cancer practically, it is not because the information is invalid, or not because it's like a diet that's difficult to follow. It's because there's no business model. It's difficult to find a business model, but I think finally now, like with all these different people selling meal plans and stuff, and supplements like what you have, there are people figured something out that kind of works.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of went through the drudgery of trying to have insurance pay for a lot of the things that I think were just completely fundamental. And yeah, it's not a fun game to play. So you also have focused a lot on athletes in nutrition that powers athletes. Like you mentioned, you have does keto make, what was it, Tyler? Is it great for athletes?
Does keto give athletes an edge?
There it is.
Yeah.
And so what is it? What is the answer? I don't know if you've told us.
So the answer is yes, it does. And I know it's controversial because the sports nutrition world is one of the most conflicted. And by conflicted, I don't mean confused. I mean misinformed, because the research is funded by companies like Gatorade and people that have to sell sugar water, basically. So sports nutritionists are really in the fix, because once they start learning about this way of doing things, like their education is the worst, because they're actually promoting sugar, right? Doctors don't go so far as to promote sugar, but sports nutritionists are basically salespeople for sugary drinks. And because there's this mantra that they learn, and that is still out there, that the best fuel for athletes is sugar. And it's all based on the worship of glycogen, muscle glycogen. But it turns out, and I go through this in detail in the talk that I have, which is somewhere online, I think. But I can put some key slides up on your show notes.
Yeah, and we can link to it too if you have maybe a YouTube or something like that.
Let's find it. Yeah. The reality is that sugar is a suboptimal fuel for even muscle cells. It's not as good as fat, and the reason that sports nutritionists learn that fat is not a good fuel, it all rests on people who are so metabolically deranged that fat doesn't work properly. They're not fat adapted, basically. They're athletes that have been studied are not fat adapted. And so the body doesn't work properly. And the streamlined system for delivering this perfect fuel of fatty acids, certain fatty acids, and ketones to the exercising heart and other muscles, the system is broken. And so sugar works better in that broken system to fuel athletes. And the system is so broken that the body system in most athletes is so dysfunctional that they are borderline insulin resistant, even if their body fat percentage is like 8.
Right.
And this is what I discovered in working with the Lakers, that, people could be perfectly healthy looking on the outside, but on the inside, their labs were awful. And their performance was struggling and suffering. And once we got their diet optimized, the numbers would look better, and their performance would turn around amazingly. And what I was doing was getting them less dependent on sugar and more able to produce ketones and more able to burn their body fat.
Was this when you were? I don't know if the same time overlapped when Lamar Odom was very popularly eating candy in between games, before games, after games. If so, I hope you said something at that point.
Yeah, so it was after he left the Lakers. But it was the big publicity around what the work I was doing at the time was around Dwight Howard, who had been a Laker he was a Laker for a year, and we got him like right after he had back surgery, right? So that is a major surgery for anybody who's not experienced it. It changes your life. And he wasn't recovering well, and it turned out that he had a major sugar habit. And once we fixed that and got the bad fats out of his diet, he wasn't driven to sugar so much, and he could, fuel his body with fat better. His performance changed basically over the All-Star break, and that it made the headlines. Like, nobody knew what was happening, but they said, "Oh my God, Superman is back," because that was his nickname, D12. But they called him Superman because he was like 7 feet tall and had these broad shoulders and perfect physique and everything. And his kryptonite had been, candy, but actually really it was vegetable oil. And so we got that out of his diet, and his back started to heal. And he had reached a point where his back was not only not healing, but the problems that had developed as a complication of the back surgery were actually getting worse. And he was developing a thing called dysesthesia that was affecting his fingers, and it could have ended his career. But fortunately, he had the willpower and the intelligence to understand that, there had to be a better way. And what I was saying kind of made enough sense to at least try it, and it worked for him. So within 2 weeks, he was massively better. So he's, to my knowledge, been committed ever since.
So one of the things that I think people are a little confused about, like you touched on earlier, is muscle glycogen and the role in sports in how it gets replenished without carbohydrates. So can you just kind of break that down or touch on that?
So we've had this idea that muscle glycogen is there to give cells energy, and only to give cells energy, right? And so muscle glycogen, what it is basically it's tiny little granules of starch inside the muscle. And a non-athlete has maybe about 100, maybe a female 100 grams, if that, in their muscles, right? Maybe a male might have 150 to 200, which is somewhere around 400 to 800 calories. So if you're totally able to drain your muscle glycogen, that's your limit. So it's been talked about as fat adaptation has been talked about as a way to get beyond that limit. But it turns out that the muscle glycogen probably sits in our muscles for something that has nothing to do with simply being burned. It is not the fuel. It is something that enables another cycle to spin. And it actually acts as a source of cellular intermediates for something else. And it replenishes after it goes down to the same degree in an athlete that is fat adapted versus an athlete that is not fat adapted. And it replenishes to the same degree without even giving the athlete that is fat adapted any carbohydrates. And we know that from the FASTER study by Finney and Volek. And so that kind of proved that there's something else going on, that the glycogen is there not as a fuel, that those athletes that are fat adapted, which, by the way, is supposed to be the normal human state. All athletes should be fat adapted, and they should also have glycogen. But the glycogen needs to be there for other purposes, not for the fuel. And so what happens is when the athlete is not fat adapted, the glycogen gets used up abnormally fast, and then the athlete's out of luck. And unless they can manage to refill, to basically eat while they're exercising. If they're doing an endurance sport, they basically have to train their gut to be able to eat while they're exercising, to be able to keep that sugar fuel flowing. But and it hasn't become such an obvious problem in the non-endurance sports, because the team sports, most athletes kind of get to rest, and it doesn't matter quite so much if their stomach is, filled up with sugar, if they have to eat while they're exercising, basically, which I don't know about you, but when I was about 8, I learned that you shouldn't eat while, just before you go for a swim, because it's, you could get a stitch. And actually we were told as kids that we could drown, right? So eating while exercising is a no-no. It's just like intuitively not good.
Well, I mean, just simply the fact that if you do eat and need to get stuff out of your gut into your bloodstream, that's going to require more blood to go to your gut instead of the tissues, which need to be, having access to oxygen and having nutrients delivered in waste products taken out. And so you're kind of, you're stealing away from the muscle's capability and other, joint surfaces, everything.
That's right. And that's why you get a cramp if you're exercising when you've eaten, because your digestive system needs blood, but in some people, it's being stolen from the digestive system and going to the muscle or the heart. And which is also muscle, so that the cramp is coming from lack of blood flow to the gut. And the reason that you have this lack of blood flow is not because you're exercising too hard with your muscles. It's because you've just eaten and you're forcing the muscles in your gut to exercise while you're also trying to exercise these other muscles. And these are opposite systems. They're completely opposite. The whole body is designed to be in a different physiologic state while we're digesting. It's a resting state. We have it's primarily, there's a whole different nervous system that drives it called the parasympathetic nervous system while we're exercising our skeletal muscle and our heart more. That's supposed to be the sympathetic nervous system driven. And the blood flow is diverted to one or the other. And to ask the body to share the blood flow when for millions of years of evolution has been designed to do one or the other is not good. It's a painful process. You get a cramp or your performance declines.
Got it. And so what you're saying here, and correct me if I'm hearing this wrong, is that people are using the system of fueling for carbohydrates and trying to restore muscle glycogen immediately and using the muscle glycogen. And that can be done, but it's just the suboptimal way to do things.
That's right. It's suboptimal. It's not going to kill you, but it's going to impair your performance.
Right.
And but you wouldn't believe it, because if you don't go about the process of fat adaptation properly, your performance will decline as you try to become fat adapted. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it really helps if you are doing this like mid-season and you're, in any way your livelihood depends on your sport. You really need to work with somebody who's an absolute expert in the process of fat adaptation, or your performance could, decline.
Right. And so do athletes especially need to go full keto if they're doing this? And if so, how long does that fat adaptation period take?
So the answer is no, you can't do that. You have to, if you take somebody who is your typical athlete and you try to just blast them with keto, it's not going to work. And so that's where a lot of athletes have tried to do this, and they're like, this doesn't work for me, because they didn't understand that going all in here in this context was not a good idea. And some people can do it because they're doing it off season or early season, and it doesn't really matter, and they kind of power through it. And it can take, a week, 2 weeks, a month to kind of get back to where you should be. And then you start experiencing the actual benefits. But I wouldn't really recommend just kind of doing it full keto. I would recommend like I say, somebody that can help you adapt it more by listening to where your body's at and what you're doing. And that's kind of actually part of what my next book is all about. It's going to be, how do you go from here to there without any performance lag or any symptoms at all whatsoever. That's called the fat burn fix. But it's, even though it's done now, it's not going to be out for a year.
The joy of publishing, huh?
The magic of the publishing world.
So then at that point, do you have some athletes still consuming some regular amount of carbohydrates, just much lower than they were doing before? Or what is kind of the sweet spot here that you've seen with some of the high-level athletes that you've worked with?
So it kind of depends on when you work with high-level athletes. I've always had to I get the best results from working with a chef. And, I work with because the athlete themselves is not going to follow the program. Because if you're talking to somebody about avoiding vegetable oils, then you're talking about cooking, right? So there were 2 athletes that were able to do it, actually 3, that I worked with the whole time. I was working with the Lakers and other people like on the side that were able to do it without hiring a personal chef because they were confident in the kitchen. They actually enjoyed cooking. And Jeremy Lin, he's like basically a part-time gourmet chef. And Chris Kamen, he was like Mr. Not sustainable. What's the word? Self-sufficient. Like he's like from Wisconsin, where if the world was, if we had Armageddon, he'd be fine because he would just like hunt and dress the deer and do all the stuff. Oh, sorry.
No problem.
And then, so those kinds of folks. Sorry, it's not listening to my. I can't make it stop ringing.
No problem. We can cut that out.
Okay.
Nice chime, though.
Yeah. Great. So where was I? Oh, yeah. So the athletes that are like basically gourmet or, the outliers in terms of skills, they can do it without a personal chef. But otherwise, you need to work through their chef or it's not going to work.
Got it.
That's my experience.
But as far as a carbohydrate amount, because there's some people who go 0 carbohydrate and try to perform. And if at least what I've noticed is that, finding a sweet spot for whatever your activity is, and maybe not 0 or 10 or 15 grams of carbs, but if you're a hard charging athlete, maybe, closer to 50 or 75. Have you found any kind of variance with people as far as what works best for them?
Well, what I usually do is like when I'm working with the athletes, I kind of start out by just cutting whatever they were doing in half. And then, until making sure that they feel normal and kind of changing slowly and, getting feedback from them about, okay, well, how did you do this time? How about this week? Or, how is your performance here? How's your digestion? How is your mental focus? How are you getting muscle cramps? Are you getting headaches? Is anything bad happening? Okay, so and now you've been good at this level for a while. So, okay, great. Let's take it down a little bit more. And I try to get people away from like flour and sugar, even as a source of carbohydrate, and working through their chefs is easy. Another reason it becomes easier because then you can use things like beans and whole grains and sprouted grain bread and sprouted grains and, semi-starchy vegetables and starchy vegetables. And chefs have a way of making these things taste good so that even an athlete that doesn't know what Brussels sprouts are, but is pretty sure he hates them to death, will eat them in the end.
Okay. Are you still working with the Lakers or not?
No, not the Lakers. Cause I was working with, Gary Vitti and another trainer there. And Gary retired as he deserved to do. And the whole entire training staff has just been almost completely like washed out and replaced with brand new people with a different philosophy. The chef, however, is still there. So if
same
people
principles.
want,
yeah, I'm
if
just
people want then they can get it.
Just curious because I don't know if you saw LeBron come out with some supplements recently, but almost every single one of them has cane sugar as one of the first ingredients.
Well, most supplement companies aren't like you.
But
not going to do that.
LeBron being a Laker, I don't know if you had an in there, you could give him some advice, tell him to pull the sugar out of there.
Oh, no, he wouldn't listen to that because that's not good business advice. So that has nothing to do with, yeah.
Maybe we'll get him on the show and chat about it.
There you go. That's good. Yeah. Ask him if what was the priority there? Was it cost or was it performance?
So what, I also saw that this kind of is an interesting one that in my research I came up with, but you are going to be the director of metabolic health for ABC Fine Wine and Spirits. Is correct?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So that's my boss right now.
Oh, okay. So that's the company.
That's the company. So they're the best company in the country. I never actually considered moving to Florida, but I'm first of all, I'm actually surprised by how nice it is. But if it weren't for them and this amazing opportunity, I wouldn't have come here. But it's really the only way that anyone who believes in this stuff is going to be able to create any kind of change.
Got it. So yeah, I just briefly saw that, and I didn't know if it meant that you were advising them on which wines and alcohol were metabolically healthier than others, or what it was. So it makes more sense now.
Oh, sure. I get that question too.
Great. Well, thanks for being on the show, Doc. Is there anywhere that people can find you? Obviously, your book, Deep Nutrition, is one that I'd highly recommend. It's kind of a textbook in deep, if you want to get into that stuff. Anywhere else?
Yeah, well, so it's kind of like, yes, it takes concentration to read it. But on the other hand, my husband is a good writer, right? So it's not like, like these books where you just put on your thinking cap and you have to concentrate. Yeah, you do have to concentrate, but he turns it into a narrative. And so it's actually, people have told me that they read it to their children at night, and
Nice.
so it reads pretty well thanks to him. So if you're interested even in reading, like if you like novels or history or culinary arts, it's on Audible, and you should listen to it if you don't want to read. If you commute, you have to listen to it. And the website is drcate.com. So that's drcate.com. And there's a ton of information there about the good fats, the bad fats, some of the controversy, how to understand, why your doctor doesn't know about it. Some of the things that maybe it would help you to understand as you go into your doctor, your trusted doctor. You may have a great relationship with your doctor, but if they tell you to take a statin for your LDL that's elevated, and you need to be armed with more information so you can become comfortable and understand, why the statin actually could be your worst enemy and actually give you diabetes. So there's that kind of information at drcate.com as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing all the hard work you're doing.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it, and thanks for doing what you do.
You got it. Chat soon. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Keto Answers Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, but even if you didn't, I would love a review. Just go over to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and pop in a review so we can get found by more people, get better guests, and have the information that you need. So please go to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. And if you're new to keto, head on over to perfectketo.com/podcast and enter your email for all our top tips and guides on getting started with the ketogenic diet. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.